Okay, so you're about to acquire a business, and after the LOI, as you're moving towards closing, the performance of the business starts to change, okay? And you're like, should I close? Do I back out? Do I renegotiate? Today, I want to cover a framework that will help you navigate the thing that you should do at that time. My name's Walker Dybel. I'm the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Buy Then Build and creator of the Acquisition Lab. What I want to talk about today is something called the availability heuristic. Okay, and a heuristic is really just a framework to help you kind of stop overthinking and move sort of quickly towards what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And when we're buying a business, I think we would all agree overthinking, analysis paralysis can all get us at different times, right? Because we're taking a big risk when we do this, and there's sort of a lot at stake. So I want to start by framing the availability heuristic in terms of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. He had one of these frameworks where people who are highly successful focus on things that are inside their control, and they know that things outside of their control are not within their power and will continue to have an impact on what's going on. And so all we can do is focus on the things in which we can have control on. That also lead to the outcomes that we want, right? Now, the availability heuristic uses the same kind of framework, okay, in terms of the model. However, the way that they think about it is we say, okay, this bigger circle is sort of like, all information, okay? And this is sort of like the information that we know, that we're aware of, okay? And the concept here is that there's all of this stuff going on, but we have a limited insight into what's happening. And so what we do is we tend to weight more heavily the information, of course, that we are aware of and sort of ignore the information that we're not aware of. And in fact, most of the information, I think we would all agree, is kind of a blind spot. Like, there's so much out there to know, right? And so what I want to do is zero in one more time and say, this is all the information, okay, that you know, that you are aware of, okay? However, this is recent information, okay? And the thing is the recent information, okay, carries a bigger weight, okay? Now, this is the essence of the availability heuristic, and that's that information that is recent carries a bigger weight than all of the information that you know and are aware of. Now, here's the thing. We already know this, okay? When people talk about a looming recession, a coming recession, when I'm working on deals, I think I've done almost 200 deals, everyone always wants to talk about, the recession and how the business is going to change and all this other kind of stuff. When people are talking about, when times are good and FBA aggregators are, paying the biggest valuations ever in history for e-com businesses, everyone wants to talk about how, whatever, not to use brokers because you can go out and just get a great and amazing deal from these aggregators. They both have truth, okay? But the point is that you're likely overweighting them in terms of the mid and long term, if not even the short term, based on what's going on. And so what weights the knowledge that we have in our brain? Well, some information might come from news, okay? Some information might be like what's trending, on Twitter or whatever social media you're on. What family conversations did you have? When you took that 4 days off for Thanksgiving and, you spent, an hour talking about the economy with your uncle, and then you went to, your spouse's family and ended up talking about, the same sort of situation or the same stock or whatever it is, that can impact what it is that you're doing and how you're maybe trading your stock portfolio or, showing up at work or who you're rooting for the Super Bowl a few months later, right? And so the point is that like some examples of what this is are things like the recession, things like the toilet paper shortage, right? Remember that during COVID, everyone was very concerned. Another example might be Peloton purchases, right, during COVID. War in Ukraine, okay? That was a major issue, and everyone was talking about, potential World War III, and not that that's off the table, but it's sort of moved on because now we're talking about AI and, with the impact that that's going to have, right? We talked about aggregators. When I had a book printing company, or right when I was buying a book printing company, all of the rage was about ebooks. The iPad was coming out, the Kindle was coming out, and the truth is that when you looked at that, even though the companies that needed headlines were making headlines, what was happening was that there was still like hundreds of billions of dollars being purchased in printed books every single year. Here's an example. And it was just that it was changing how they got distributed. But because newspapers were failing and bookstores were failing, people were not understanding, okay, the fact that books weren't going anywhere, okay, and that we still wanted books and we still wanted knowledge, but it was the availability heuristic that was telling everybody else, don't go into the printing business, okay? I bought my first company during the halo of this effect because I knew that this is what was going on and that the greater picture had a stronger trend that I was able to capitalize on. That was my first acquisition. I ran that company as CEO for 7 years before I exited, okay? Buying an existing business rather than starting from scratch is a great example. When Buy Then Build came out in 2018, no one was talking about this, not like it is today. If I get on any social media event, someone's trying to teach me how to buy a business, which is great. Acquisition is equally as important as innovation. I've got another video on that. But the point is all of these things kind of weight how we view the world, right? Now, let's do this. How does all of this, Walker, relate to deal making and me closing a deal and moving towards closing? Well, let's look at it. First, you've probably heard me talk about the 11th hour freakout, okay? The 11th hour freakout is something where a buyer will, start to freak out right before closing. And the reason is because, the initial allure and sort of mystery of the business at the beginning has sort of worn off while they've learned how the sausage is getting made and all the rest of it. And there's always kind of like a pause that's like, hey, what's up? Do I really want to buy this company or not? Okay. And I want to take it a step further because that's just sort of like new knowledge, right? And the truth is that businesses are always moving. You can't put a business under LOI and expect that, the same exact, trailing performance is gonna have be there by the time you close. In fact, if it is, that's ultra bizarre and you should look into it. But in order to accentuate, okay, the 11th hour freakout, I just want to make an example here, okay? So this is revenue. And this is time, okay? And I have a business that I'm working with right now where they doubled 2 years in a row, okay? So let's just pretend for easy math, we'll say this is, 1 million, 0 to 1 million in the first year. And then the second year they went to 2 million, okay? And then the third year they went to 4 million, okay? And this is actually pretty close. And so this is what you're looking at is 1, 2, 3 years of performance, okay? So this is 3 years of performance. And there's a situation where in the last, I'm gonna extend this just to make the point, because this is more common. In the last 4 weeks, okay, this has dropped, business has dropped. It's been a terrible month, okay? And before we sort of go into why, because in this specific deal, it kind of doesn't matter. It's all about your specific deal and what's going on, right? And so what's happening is, this is what I want you to do. I want you to say to yourself, okay, this change, and I think you can see what I'm trying to say here. This was 3 years, this is 4 weeks, okay? And if we are realistic about what's happening here, we can start to imagine that there's obvious product market fit, right? There's obvious infrastructure. There's obviously things that are working in this business, okay? And is this one little blip, okay, is it so significant that, how do we give meaning to that? And this is all about the availability heuristic, because we're all of a sudden weighting it very heavily despite the entire history of the company, okay? And so the first question you need to ask yourself is this material, okay? And Buy Then Build, I talk about material adverse change, all right? And the thing is this a material change? Now there's a rule of thumb, a heuristic, I guess you could say, where if it's plus or minus 10%, okay, it's not even material, okay? It's really just not a material thing because you have a business that's sort of moving, okay? And it's moving through time. the seller may have been, tied up in you with the special project of selling the business, and that's a pretty heavy weight on people. It could just be that simple, okay? I see that a lot. But it could be something else, right? And does this change impact your mid to long-term outlook, okay? Is something going on here that is actually going to impact this, all right? That's the second question. Is the business terrible now? Do I need to absolutely walk away? Is this something that I need to walk away from because the reason for this is something that is fundamental to the business that's going to be a problem? Or is it something that maybe I require some concessions now, okay? More importantly, can you get concessions or changing in terms, okay, even if you don't necessarily need them, okay? You can sort of point to this and say, this is like a good private equity trick, like, oh, look at this, right? And so can you get concessions or maybe even get a slightly better deal? Sometimes, and sometimes it's overreaching, okay? It just sort of depends on what's going on in the situation. But the other thing is that I know we're talking about it today in terms of this, but here's the point that I want to make, is that the opposite is also true, where I see, again, use this 4-week scenario where, the business all of a sudden starts to increase at a more rapid rate than before, okay? And the seller, will usually talk to me and say, like, listen, I'm selling too low, right? I'm selling too low. Like, this person we're in the deal with, they're being all cautious and they're doing all this stuff. They've never sold a business before. They don't understand buying and the risk and all the rest of it. And they want to, they'll start to ask, like, can we get more money from this person, or do we move on? The first question is still the same. Is it material? Is this a material gain, or is it simply the fact that we're moving through time while we're trying to transact? Okay. And if it is material, maybe there is a conversation to be had in the same way, sort of the reverse of the buyer situation, right? And the biggest question that I will kind of pose to sellers is, is this worth walking away from your personal goal of selling your business? Because make no mistake, when people are selling their business, it's of course you have those situations where they kind of have to for, death, disability, divorce, whatever they are, and the 5 Ds they call them, and, drugs, and I can't think of it, but so they typically want to sell because of a life goal or a life change or a personal reason. Hey, I've been doing this for 12 years. I've been doing this for 30 years. Okay. I've built tremendous value in 7 figures of value in, a 3 to 5 year period of time. And I just am ready to sort of cash out and move on to my next project. All of these are totally fine reasons, right? Is it enough? Okay. If you're this close to a close and to walk away knowing that, that's something that you kind of need to decide in terms of the deal and the people involved, right? There's a Venn diagram of the seller and the buyer, and where they overlap, that's where the deal happens, okay? So the thing is that once this can happen and the other can happen, okay? And, you sort of hope that everything just continues on, because buyers and sellers tend to freak out one way or another if there's a big change, okay? But the thing is that when you're a buyer, I always encourage you to move towards closing quickly, okay? And that's not to create undue urgency, but rather, I've talked in the past about how your confidence and speed to closing is typically the thing that as a buyer will get you the deal to begin with. But also, time kills all deals, okay? And I don't care which way this thing is wiggling, it's gonna wiggle and it's gonna destroy the deal one way or another, okay? And so if you have already decided that you wanna buy this company enough that you write an LOI, okay, with a price and terms that says like, hey, I wanna get married to you, okay, here's the sort of price and terms of our marriage, and it's agreed to, spare something, material popping out in due diligence. You theoretically wanna buy this company for reasons that are personal to you and your reasons. So you always want to move towards closing quickly, okay? So the lessons for today, the takeaway from today is, the availability heuristic has a way of overemphasizing the ultra recent events over the macro reasons for wanting to do something, okay? We're gonna highlight this right here, as well as all the stuff coming out in the news and on Twitter and all the rest of it. Number two, the heuristic is really underscoring the fact that this is one moment in time. In other words, when you can buy a publicly traded stock, okay, you might buy some here, you might buy some here, maybe it goes down, you buy some here, you buy some up here, right? You can do little chunks over a long period of time. But in the private market, when you're buying a company, it's almost always one moment in time transaction. So this person owns the company here, and then afterwards, you own it over here, okay? And then hopefully you have the same track, and then you sell it to somebody else, eventually. Please don't die with your business. So you sell it to somebody else, and so you own it for a period of time. You're responsible for the performance for a period of time, but the availability heuristic really emphasizes the fact that there's one moment in time that this purchase price and these terms are getting set, and it makes the seller feel like they're getting their last paycheck, and it makes the buyer feel like they really have to get this right. When in reality, and I don't mean to oversimplify this, but you're looking for good businesses that you can operate and grow, okay? That will transform your life, okay, and the things that you get to do. And so a good business rarely has a deal-stopping event in the short term, okay? All right, that's another lesson for today. And the fourth lesson is, if it is a hot potato, okay, then I hope that you had the proper evaluation and analysis process before LOI, like the types of things that we teach in the acquisition lab, or that you appropriately used due diligence in order to find, the fact that it is a hot potato, okay? So, but again, if you know anything about me, you know that, I believe from my almost 20 years experience doing this, sellers are just like most people. 99% of them just want to do the right thing, okay? And, they have a business, they want to sell, it's personal reasons, whatever. Probably 1% of the population is total scumbags that are trying to take advantage of you, okay? So there's a 99%, I'm making up a stat, obviously, but there's a 99% chance that there's no issue going on at all, right? And there's a 1% chance that it's a hot potato. And so, understanding that, okay, will help you understand that trying to de-risk an acquisition is not really where the magic is, okay? The magic is in finding a business that you love, that you can operate, that you can be proud of, okay, that you can make a difference in, that you can take ownership of, and change your life moving forward. That's the point of acquisition entrepreneurship, okay? And this is a life-changing experience for you, and I don't want the availability heuristic to cause you to flush a deal that you already decided back here you were interested in, okay? If you want to buy a business in the next 12 to 24 months, I should say 6 to 24 months, check out Acquisition Lab. We're the premier accelerator for helping people buy a company, either their first or grow through acquisition. Check us out at acquisitionlab.com. Check out Buy Then Build on Amazon. Thanks so much. See you on the inside.